Start over.
Go.
It is 7:02, and thank you all for coming out tonight for Candidates Night. My name is Eric Gross. I'm the school district moderator and happy to be moderating tonight's Candidates Night. A big thank you goes to the Friends of the Library. Chris, thanks very much for orchestrating this. Appreciate it. This is an important event which provides us all an opportunity to learn more about the candidates' motivations and positions. Just to let you all know, we are going mask optional, as you can tell tonight. Most of you probably have been vaccinated, and the numbers in New Hampshire are way down, as you're all aware. So we're leaving it up to everybody to make a determination as to their approach to masking. As for publicity and for letting candidates know that this event is going on, I'm told that social media and online news outlets were used over the last couple weeks to prompt awareness and to encourage participation. So hopefully that awareness was fairly widespread. I know there are other events going on tonight in town, so there's always competition. Video of the proceedings tonight will be posted in the next couple days, I'm told. And so thank you very much to Tim Griffin for handling our audiovisual needs tonight. Thank you. So let's get started. Our process will be as follows. We'll start with candidates for town positions first. Then we'll move to the school races. All candidates vying for an open position on a particular board will be presented in the same grouping. Each candidate will have up to 3 minutes to introduce him or herself and to express to me why he or she is running for this office. Candidates should please limit your comments to yourself as a candidate. As this is not a debate format, I ask that you please not digress to discussion about any other candidate or to an unrelated topic. At all times, comments must be respectful of others present or absent. The 30-second warning will be given at the 2-minute 30-second mark, and at the 3-minute mark, please quickly finish your thoughts. I will curtail candidates as appropriate for time and for content. Following our introductory speeches, the floor will be open to questions from the community. If you would like to ask a question of any of the candidates, please raise your hand and I will acknowledge you in turn. We will ask, because we are videotaping this and audio is very important, not only for the candidates' responses, but your questions. We'll be using this microphone. So when you want to make a question, when you want to ask a question, simply come over here and then I will hand you the microphone so that you can make that question and then you may return to your seat. As usual, like with our deliberative sessions, I just ask that everybody state your name and address and ask your question loudly and clearly so that everyone can hear. Certainly the audio will help with that tremendously. Please refrain from introductory commentary as we only have so much time this evening to get through all the candidates. And similar to the candidates, I ask you please make your questions respectful of others at all times. I will cue the respondent or respondents working down the table as appropriate. Responses will be limited to 2 minutes and a 30-second warning will be given. Are there any questions that anybody has at this point before we get going? Okay. Seeing and hearing none, we hope to have this done within the next hour or so. I see we have 8 candidates, so I think we can meet that goal, as long as there aren't too many questions. So let's begin. So we're going to start with our town clerk tax collector race. Ellie Roberts. So Kelly is dutifully bringing, pick any seat you want, Kelly. Up here, one of these 6 seats. So Kelly is dutifully bringing along her name placard. She'll place it right in front for the camera and for all of you to see. Should there be any confusion about who Kelly is, the name placard. So Kelly, you have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes to make a statement.
Hello everyone, I am running.
Pull that right in close to you.
Hello.
There you go.
I'm running for re-election for town clerk tax collector and ask for your vote tonight. The 3 years have gone by so fast and I got a lot accomplished. Mainly I brought in credit cards and electronic payments. I brought in boat registrations. And in the next 3 years, I want to bring in hunting, fishing licenses and OHRV registrations, as well as work on a in-depth archival project we are working on. I'm really excited. 2020 was the most difficult year ever, but I still feel like I got a lot to give, and please vote for me.
Thank you. Does anybody have a question for Kelly?
I have a quick question.
Come on up. And
Hi, Kelly. Josh Crespo, I live over on Range Road. I have a quick question regarding the hunting licenses. I know that the Fish and Game is promoting most people to purchase their licenses online. How will your service differ from that?
The hunting fishing licenses is going to be available in our office, and we will be using basically an online portal that Staples set us up with, and it's going to be convenient for the people that don't have computer at home, or they're going on a long weekend and need to get their license. They can stop by the clerk's office and get it. Anyone in the state or town can come to our office and get it. We will be an authorized location, and we get $1 for every hunting fishing license, and we'll get $4 for every off-road vehicle, snowmobile or ATV.
Great, thank you.
any other questions for Kelly? I guess you're all set. Thank you, Kelly. Yes. So next up, we'll have the Municipal Budget Committee. For all candidates who are coming up, please come up with your placards and find a seat. Just your name on that. Great, okay. 5 candidates, very good. We have 8 listed on the election. There are 3 openings for 3 years, there's 1 opening for 1 year. So as you're introducing yourself, please indicate which race you're running for, so that everybody can know exactly how to take your situation. So we'll start at the far right. Please state your name, address, and what you're running for, and you have 3 minutes to make a statement.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Harvey Pretorius. I'm running for the 3-year Municipal Budget Committee position. I've been part of the Municipal Budget Committee for the last 3 years. Been the chairman for the last 2, which has been a great privilege. It's been nice to get an understanding of the town inner workings and how the budgets are prepared and then delivered to us from the board of selectmen. I've been in town for about 5 years now. Joined the Municipal Budget Committee initially to get involved in the community. Had the opportunity to meet a lot of you. And I have 3 young kids in this community, which is what engages me to run for re-election this year and then hopefully for future years. My kids are just about to start into the school. Like a lot of people in my neighborhood, we've been fortunate to move into a neighborhood that It's probably higher density than the majority of people in town like to appreciate. But it's been a great opportunity for us because we really enjoy the community, enjoy the town. But my neighborhood's really unique, and with a lot of the expansion, certainly in southern New Hampshire, I think Deerfield is really in a unique position. And I'm not an advocate for high density areas in Deerfield by any means, but I'm also not trying to be complacent about it either. I think this is a small town. I think that our neighborhood and other neighborhoods are really in unique positions that challenge our community in unique ways. And I guess I try to bring a light to that from someone who is in a position where a lot of these decisions about school expansion, about high schools, that impacts me, and that's going to impact me for 10, 15 years. And so I think that makes me different than most people that are running for the budget committee or are currently on the budget committee. So I ask for your vote. I've enjoyed my time on the budget committee, and I hope to continue what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burke?
Yeah, thank you. So, good evening. My name's Kevin Harvey. I'd like to thank the Friends of the Library for hosting this event. This is a great event every year in Deerfield, and it's nice to be able to have it this year. I moved to Deerfield with my wife and children in 2009, and I've been in continual public service to this community that almost that entire time. I served on the Open Space Committee. I served as a trustee of the trust funds. I served on the Safety Services Steering Committee. I also served 7 years on the Municipal Budget Committee. Several of those years I was chairman of the Budget Committee, and I'm running for re-election for the Municipal Budget Committee. I took a little hiatus off of the Budget Committee to pursue some other things, being one of your state reps among those. And the direction of the Budget Committee in the last few years is not a direction that I think is the right role for that committee. So as an example, the Budget Committee spent about 2 hours considering an over $14 million budget for the Deerfield School District. And that is a very large budget. It is a very complex budget, and I think it deserves more consideration than that. And so the school board, does their work, and they hand the budget over to the Budget Committee. And the Budget Committee triples the number of eyes looking at that budget. And I would say the same thing for the town budget. We send back very large surpluses every year. And so I'm not sure why we're collecting in taxes. The other thing with a budget, the town has had less than a third of their proposed budgets pass in the last 12 years. And it's about 2/3 of the proposed budgets from the school board pass. And people say, people just come in and vote for the small number. And some people do that, but I don't believe that's what most people do. I think people follow along, and I think they're looking at what we're spending or proposing to spend money on. And if we are spending money on the things that the voters of Deerfield believe are priorities, they will vote in favor of proposed budgets. When we have budgets that do not reflect the spending priorities of the voters, they vote no. And if you go back and look at a lot of those budgets that didn't pass and the money that was proposed in those budgets, it's easy to see why. So I'd like to get back onto the Budget Committee and try to steer our spending priorities to be able to get projects done in this town that are long overdue, that need to be done, and get budgets that we can get passed at the ballot box to get out of this cycle of default budgets. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. My name is Josh Presley. I live on Range Road. I've been a resident of Deerfield off and on for the past 10 years. Moved out for a short time and moved back here with my wife and kids, and looking forward to continuing our life here. I saw an opening in the Budget Committee for the one-year position, which is what I'm running for. I don't have any prior experience in town government. I would like to change that. too many of my friends and too much of my past has been complaining about decisions that I had no influence over. And I think the only way to make a change in those areas is to become involved, which is what I'd like to do. And I can tell you from my work history, I work for a town municipality, so I have a little bit of understanding about how a budget should work and why certain increases are necessary. I am not a fan of frivolity or making spending choices just because somebody asked for it. I think that spending should be done wisely and done with a plan. And I would like to see a little bit more about how this town works and how the budget process works. And I think being in this position will help me gain an understanding in that. And I hope that I'll be able to serve you well during that period of time.
Thank you.
My name is Will Huger. I live at 1 Sunrise Terrace Lane in Deerfield here. And I've only been here for 3 years. I grew up in rural Vermont and Connecticut. And don't hold that against me. And I have lived the American dream. I started with nothing. My family was not rich or by any means. I went to good schools. I'm a product of public education. I've never run for a public office in my life. I've been a businessman all my life and a chemist is my profession. But I have been doing budgets for the last 25 years. As I own a company now, as I said, the American dream led me to own a company, which is a $60 million a year global corporation. So I'm well versed in budgets and saying no when you have to say no, and saying, how come we don't have this in the budget when it needs to be added to the budget? I think I'm pretty good at it. I've been successful. I have 7 children. 6 of them are in the medical profession, and so I'm very proud of that. I have 11 grandchildren. I've chosen Deerfield to retire. My 2 sisters live here, one in Nottingham and one in Deerfield on Middle Road. And so I love the town, and the only reason I'm here tonight is I'd like to give something back to the town. I don't certainly need this job by any means. In fact, I almost hope I don't win because I don't really want to do this. But I really do think I could do a good job of budgeting. I think that the budget process is somewhat changed from what the original intent of the town was for how the budgets are prepared and presented to the Municipal Budget Committee. I believe that the Municipal Budget Committee needs to take more authority, more ownership. Once the school board and the town submit those budgets to the Budget Committee, I think the Budget Committee should own those budgets. We should be responsible for them. We're not just there to look them over cursory and make sure all the math adds up or that everything is in its proper place on the sheet. It's really about us taking the responsibility to present a budget to the town that they can approve. As Kevin rightly said, there's been a very poor track record of the town approving the budgets being submitted by the Budget Committee, and I think there's a reason for that. People don't need to be taxed to get more money because the government simply always finds more needs to fill the money that they have. So I'm a fiscal conservative. I think it's pretty obvious. That doesn't mean though that I just slash budgets. I look at them just like my company and I ask myself, is this something that we really need? And is this a good price? Or I ask, why isn't this in the budget? Why are we not funding things that we need? We need good fire, police, services, all of those things are important to our community, and we need good schools. As I said, I'm a product of public education. I hope you vote for me. I know I'm an unknown. I have a long shot here tonight, but I hope you do give me your vote.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Andrea Hartelling, and I come to this position actually with some past experience also. I was on the budget committee for 2 years, chair for 1. And what I do bring to the budget committee is a 45-year career in accounting. I am a CPA. I've worked in public accounting, corporate accounting, not-for-profit. I've taught accounting for 35 years at Siena College. And with that, I had to teach about budgets. I had to make budgets in my corporate roles. So, coming to the budget committee with a lot of fiscal background and I understand numbers. When I was on the budget committee, I also made it a point to go to a municipal budget training program that the municipal association puts on. I believe that every new member on the municipal budget committee should go to that training because municipal budgeting is different from other budgeting. The rules for default budget are very specific. Based on that training, I was able at some points to change how default budgets were prepared, to take some money out of them, quite honestly. And the regular budget, it really is disappointing that we keep voting budgets down. And I do think that we need to get back to having a budget that can be passed by the citizens, and that budget then has to reflect what the community needs, and there has to be a sales pitch associated with it. I do believe right now there are people that vote just simply, bottom line is less, and you haven't told me why I need to make this increase. So again, I bring a different skill set, and I was happy for the years that I was on the committee, and I do hope that I can get your vote again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Candidates, we'll now open the floor up to questions for any or all of the candidates. Please come up here. Hand you the microphone.
This is always simple. I didn't hear what Will and Andrea, which one they were running for. One or
Yes, I'm
three?
sorry. Three, both of us are three.
Okay, so there's only one person here that's voting for, that's for one. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Please don't be shy. It's a great opportunity.
I've
Come on.
for a lot of years, I can be really loud.
You have to come
Can you come
forward
use
to
the
it on the
microphone?
recording, sorry.
I can hear you from my house.
I know. Keep it in practice for something.
I guess, just so we can hear a little bit more, what do you see as priorities for Deerfield? And even what areas do maybe you feel we're spending too much on? I guess I'm curious where you want a budget that passes, so why do you think it's not?
Thank you.
Excuse me? Which one will you address?
All of them.
Great. We'll start down at the end, Mr. Pretorius.
Hey, yeah, thanks. I think that's a really good question. So because I have a personal stake in some of these big ticket items like the school, it's hard for me to vote to, remove money from the school, right? I think, there's a lot of talk about the school budget, and the school budget was actually incredibly competitive this year. They actually, on non-discretionary funds, there was an increase. But on discretionary funds, things that the municipal budget committee gets to talk about, there's actually key line items that the school budget worked really hard, where the school team found money to remove from that. So in terms of what the NBC could do, they took money away. So that was a kind of a personal victory from our perspective. I do think that the town is challenged with its roads and its infrastructure, right? We have old roads. We have a budget that doesn't keep up with them. And I think we don't have the staffing or the ability to maneuver to address the road issues. So even at the pace that the Board of Selectmen are talking about, by the time we address Road 1 and get through all the other roads, the lifetime of Road 1 has already expired. And so we're just kind of chasing our tail with no ability to keep up with it. That to me is more a staffing issue, ability to get out requisites and issue that. So, should our road agent be the person doing the jobs, or should he be managing the contracts? I think is a good question, right? Otherwise, we're all going to be replacing rims and tires on our cars for the foreseeable future, and we're not acting to do anything about it, right? And so, in fact, the largest increase in the budget for this year is in fact on road maintenance, hoping that the road agent offsets some of that workload because he does do 3 jobs, right? So I think we got to pay attention to I think from a personal point of view, where we spend too much money, I think things like having the Parks and Rec department ask for another assistant director, right? I think is too much, right? I think some of those key areas, right? But we're talking about tens of K on a $5 million program, right? But I do think that it's parts of the budget are death by a million cuts. And so when I look at the Parks Department, I appreciate what they do. I appreciate what the Parks Director does. I just don't know if we need 2.5 full-time people to do that job, right? That's my personal point of view, but I'm one of, 9, 11 people on the board. So that would be my immediate answer to things.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Verville.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. It's a fantastic question. But let's get some facts straight. The Deerfield municipal budget this year is a 15% increase on the current operating budget. And almost 60% of that 15% increase goes to increases in salaries, benefits, and retirement. Okay? So when we say that, the 15% budget increase is to start getting ahead of our roads, there's some money in the highway department, but the vast majority of that increase is just not going there, and it's not going to any of those other causes. I fought for years to get more money in highway when I was on the budget committee to get ahead of our roads. We neglected our roads for the better part of a decade that I lived here. 2 years ago, we had a special warrant article by the select board to put $200,000 towards roads, and that money was used. We have the same question this year. Please vote yes on the $200,000 for highway. A few years ago, we started a trust fund, an emergency trust fund for winter maintenance should it get too expensive, right? And we've drawn off that a couple of times. Maybe we should be drawing off that fund a little more often, replenishing it by a standalone warrant article because that question passes. And that would free up more money in the regular budget for highway maintenance. But if we're not going to be honest about where the majority of the money of the 15% increase this year is going, you lose the faith and confidence of the voters, and they vote no. We simply have to give them an honest explanation of where the money is going. Every year, the town brings back a surplus, and they can't run a deficit. There always has to be a small surplus. The question is, what size should those be? On the school side, the two biggest priorities that have been left all but unaddressed in any serious way for way too long are space needs issues. We have 2 trailers in the parking lot, 20 years old and 17 years old, that house 4 classrooms. And there is still no plan to correct that. We have a crowded school. It needs to be addressed, but it's not being addressed. The other thing, and that should be a standalone capital improvement bonded project. It shouldn't take this long to be able to fix that problem. The other thing that I advocated for, and in fact successfully got money added into the budget, is for direct student services, right? What does that mean? That means pens, paper, pencils, books. Go into classrooms and look at the wear use, the wear level of most of the books that those kids can pull off the shelf. They are old, beaded, and ragtag.
Thank you, Mr. Verville.
And the school board didn't spend the money, so it's one thing to put it in. If they don't spend it, what do you get? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll reiterate what I kind of said earlier, that I really don't have experience in a public service committee, but I do have some understanding about a municipal budget because I work for a municipality. I understand the necessity for small increases every year to cover things like salaries, benefits, health insurance costs, and things like that. What I don't understand is things like when our property values got reassessed and the property values increased, in my case, $100,000. I was told that, and I don't know if I was told this by the right person or not, but I was told that my taxes aren't going to go up because the tax rate is going to drop to compensate for that. My taxes still went up almost 20% from last year to this year. I've spoken to a number of other people in town that had similar or higher increases on their tax rate. My limited capabilities doesn't understand why that happened, and I would like to learn more about why that is. I know that there has been a lot of discussion about the school budget and about the surplus that they had this year, and why they have such a huge surplus and are still asking for more money. Little things like that. So I look at this opportunity as more of a learning experience, and I hope to be able to, like I said, give back to the community at the same time. Again, the best option for us is to plan for some of those large expenditures and not just knee-jerk and say, yes, we're going to spend that money right away, but plan for it so that it happens in a timely fashion. It doesn't hit us with a huge tax increase.
Thank you. Mr. Huber.
Well, I certainly agree with the remarks of Kevin about the classroom situation and the space requirements for our students. I would prioritize, I think the question went around what would we prioritize. I certainly support the expansion of the school to do that. It's unfortunate that it seems like, again, being new to the process, I can't be sure, but it seems as though there's been several opportunities where we could have started a program to improve the classrooms. And for whatever reasons, the voters decided not to support those things. So we're way behind on that. Another area where we're way behind is on our police department. Our police department needs some modernization. We need some ability to handle situations that none of us want to think about, but we have to be realistic about what the world is like. We have to be able to protect our citizens adequately and to be prepared for acts that we probably can't even think of at the moment. But there's some serious need, I believe, to improve the police department and other of our town offices. These opportunities come up, they get postponed and postponed and postponed, and sometimes the amount of money that you spend later is a lot more than the amount of money you could have spent earlier to do some of these things and let them get worse and worse. It's kind of like maintaining a home. So if I'm elected, I will be working on some of these big ticket items. I don't think the municipal board should be, budget committee should be thinking about $20 items and spending 20 minutes or an hour talking about little ticket items simply because they don't feel they have the authority to talk about the bigger ticket items. So I think that that's what's kind of missing in the MDC and how we abdicated the responsibility to look at these big ticket items and make decisions for the voters. And that's why the voters then reject it when we give it to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hartelling.
I do agree that we have at least two big projects that need to be addressed. The school expansion is certainly coming at some point soon. And we, a couple of years ago, denied the warrant article having to do with the safety complex. Both of these things need to be addressed. Unfortunately, the Municipal Budget Committee is not where those things have to start. It's the selectmen that have to get the safety project back running and going. And yes, we can look at the numbers, but we don't create the budget. The Budget Committee looks at what has been proposed. We don't create new proposals. We don't say, oh, let's add on to the school. That's the school budget's or school board's job. Our job is simply to review the numbers on those big projects and to maybe make a good case for why those should go forward. The other thing that got voted down, I think 2 years ago, was the proposal to update our master plan. The master plan for the community is a vital ingredient in looking at what are the demographics, where are we going as a community, how are things changing, what's up with the planning board and the zoning board, et cetera. And until we get that piece in place, I don't know that we even, we need that to also go forward before we can go further. That also I don't think that's sold very well. And I know in a community like this, it's difficult. You know, we don't have a huge attendance tonight. The deliberative sessions don't get the attendance we might hope for. And therefore, I think there needs to be more outreach to make a sales pitch about these things that need to happen. And so that would be, you know, those are the three things I think that need to be prioritized. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the panelists? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, candidates. We'll be taking a brief break while the AV gets set up for the second session, which is the school session.
Oh, it's literally just on the start, so you can keep going.
So our school board candidates, welcome to the front.
Everybody gets their own table. We all have our own table.
You ready, Tim?
Ready?
Okay, so we have three candidates for the school board positions. There are two positions open, each for 3 years, and we'll start at the far end. Please introduce yourself, name, street, and your statement.
Hi, my name is Jenny Wellington. I live on North Road. My husband and I have lived in Deerfield for 10 years. I'm a 20-year educator. I started my career in New York City teaching the Bronx and Queens, moved to New Hampshire to go to UNH, and then took a job at Pittsfield where I was an 11-12 English teacher for 7 years. I also was the humanities chair and was really instrumental in like helping the school with student-centered learning and some of the transitions they did. I really believe in public education. I'm a product of public education. The colleges I went to were all public. And I think that I'd be really good for this role. I know I'm new. I don't have children in the school district, but I'm a big picture thinker. I'm in my current job, I work for VLAX, which is the Virtual Learning Academy Charter High School in the state. So I'm an English teacher for online students. And I also am a consultant. So I visit schools all over New England and New York to give them advice on how to improve their school and how to make things better. I was just in Franklin High School today, which was very illuminating. And so I bring lots of these ideas into this position of how to do things creatively. When I was in Pittsfield, I started the Restorative Justice Program. I'm a doer, I get things done. That's who I am. I jump in and I get it done. We started the Restorative Justice Program with a 1.5 year research with school students, administrators, community members. And after a 1.5 years, we had it passed by the school board. It was written into policy and to our handbook. And then a year later, we had students that were mediating situations in school. So Restorative Justice is an alternative discipline program that is about mediation and fixing the harm that was caused in the community instead of just punishing. So people take personal responsibility and they learn from that. It's still a system that Pittsfield uses even though I'm not there. And it's now being used down at their elementary school. So within 2 years of proposing that system, we had a full running system that prevented recidivism for students. Once they went to restorative justice, they did not ever get in trouble in that same way with those same students again. And usually it actually prevented them from getting in trouble in bigger ways. And so that's just one example of like, I get it done. And I really just want to bring this expertise and my experience visiting schools to the community, to serve this community. I really love living here and I'm just asking for your vote tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Baker.
Hi, I'm Christina Baker. I've got some notes on my phone, so please bear with me.
Move your microphone forward.
Please bear with me if I glance down at my phone. There's a couple things I wrote that I want to be sure to mention. I have lived here for 8 years. I have 3 kids. I have 2 kids that are currently enrolled in DCS, and I have 1 that will be enrolled in just a year or 2. So I have a long road ahead working with DCS and whatever high school we end up choosing or make a change of in that contract. A little bit about my background. I work in marketing. I have worked in marketing on the nonprofit side and also with some tech companies. The nonprofit side has really taught me a lot about collaboration and being very creative on a budget. I also took that experience and co-founded a nonprofit called New Hampshire Young Veterans Network that I currently serve as executive director on and manage a board of all volunteers. We are a young professional network geared towards New Hampshire veterans that come back to the state. And then on the tech side, that has really taught me about the power of technology, the availability of technology, where technology is heading, and how to be agile and open-minded and very energetic in achieving goals, setting goals, achieving them, and being agile in how you go about achieving those goals. So my real drive for joining the school board is I would really love to bring more effective communication between the citizens of Deerfield and the school board. I would like to bring, incorporate more modern communication styles and maybe some more technology-driven initiatives that we can implement to keep those lines of communications open. I believe in driving. I want to drive initiatives forward. I'm a very driven person. I have many roles, and I create results. That's part of my job, is analyzing ROI and what is making an impact and what is not. I think where a lot of people who run for a public office sometimes stumble is that they don't realize the work that's involved. I think they get angry one day and decide that they're going to go down and put their name down because they're angry about something. That's not me. I've attended school board meetings throughout the years of living here in Deerfield. In July, I really took a strong interest, and since the beginning of July, I have only missed 3 school board meetings. I have been at almost every single meeting since then, as a member of the public, oftentimes the only member of the public, and I have made comments on record that you can go and read if you are more interested in my views. But my point of that is that I can hit the ground running because I have a deep understanding of the issues facing us right now. And I think that will allow me to just hit the ground running and jump right in and get the work done. And that's what I'm looking to do, is get the work done. So please vote for me.
Thank you. Mr. Langlois.
Hello, everybody. How are you tonight? My name is Zach Langlois. I'm currently the chairman of the Deerfield School Board. Listening to what these 2 women have said makes me feel like an old man suddenly, because I have been in this town my entire life, just shy of 40 years. I grew up about a mile that way. I had an 8-year stint where I owned a home over there, and I currently live on South Road. So I'm excited to hear actually from what the budget committee candidates were talking about, because it sounds like they're going to support hopefully an upcoming project that we're working on. It's been 6 years that I've been on the board. It's been a very challenging year for the last year. There's been a lot going on, a lot to deal with, a lot that nobody anticipated. A long storm weather, which, although it's very easy to look back at decisions that you have to make and question them, I stand behind decisions that I made as a board member and that the board made. We have big projects coming that I'd like to finish. We are currently working on an expansion project. We've contracted architects and we're getting that off the ground and hope to have something on the ballot next year. And we're working on our high school contracts. Those are 2 big heavy items, 2 items I want to finish, and I love your support so that we can see them through. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now it's the audience's turn now. Are there any questions for our candidates?
Good evening, Kevin Virgil. So the current federal administration is strongly pushing the integration of critical race theory into curriculums across the country. And that will almost certainly trickle down from the state. There does seem to be a groundswell if not across the country, in many areas, opposed to the integration of critical race theory into curriculum. So my question to all three candidates is, what is your position on critical race theory, and do you believe that it should be included and/or integrated into the curricula used at the Deerfield Community School?
Thank you. Ms. Wellington.
I knew you were going to ask that. I know you've been asking that in your forums. So critical race theory is an academic lens through which to view our history. It's one of the academic lenses. When I taught in Pittsfield, I gave my students an essay by Audre Lorde, who's a Black poet and writer, writing about her experience in 1947, traveling down to Washington and not being able to stay at hotels because her family was Black, and not being able to eat in the train car. And when my students read it, they didn't understand what was happening. They didn't know about the Jim Crow laws. They didn't know about the things that Blacks weren't allowed to do in the 1940s and 50s. And it was a stark moment for me to realize that to ignore a huge part of our history, not great part, was to do a disservice to my students and to send them out into the world with a lack of knowledge and understanding for a huge part of our country. So, you know, I don't advocate teaching critical race theory to kindergartners, but, you know, we have a K-8 school, and if there are 8th graders that were learning about racism, I would never want to stand in the way of them finding resources to help support that knowledge. I do not think that we should be censoring the topic of teaching the ugly parts of our history, be it racism, be it sexism, be it anti-Semitism and the Holocaust. That is not creating citizens that are going to go out into the world and make it better if they don't know the history. And I think the job of public education is to create citizens that understand the past and work to create a better future.
Thank you. Ms. Baker.
Thanks for the question, Kevin. I too knew that this was probably coming. I think Jenny did a great job of showing a very concrete example of how you can teach their many different viewpoints of history through you know, different materials and use in the classroom. I don't believe that in order to teach diversity or the many valid viewpoints of history, you need to implement critical race theory. So no, I would not support it.
Thank you. Mr. Langlois.
Thank you for the question, Kevin. So first off, critical race theory as a term has been molested in many different ways. And so you have to understand what it is and what it means and the way it's being interpreted in today's society. So am I interested in preventing our educators from having thought-provoking conversations with our students? I am not. We need to accept our history for what it was. We need to look back in our history and we need to learn from it. So to that extent, we need to allow our educators to teach the kids. We need to allow them to have thought-provoking conversations with the kids. And we need to allow them to teach our students to grow and think on their own.
Thank you. Any other questions for our candidates?
Bernie Cameron. So Jenny, this is a question for you. You taught 7 years at Pittsfield. So Pittsfield, as you know, was part of the Claremont lawsuit from eons ago, it seems like. And I am just in awe of what they have been able to accomplish, considering the funds that they have available to them. So you're very aware, I'm sure, of the inequity in our state in funding. It's based mostly on property taxes in property poor towns like Pittsfield, Claremont. and many others. It's very inequitable. So if you could just give me some of your thoughts about, as a school board member, do you feel that the Deerfield School Board has any sort of responsibility for speaking up with our legislature? What is the role of individual school board members when it comes to looking at our state and how we fund our schools?
I'm really glad you asked that question, actually. I am a passionate advocate for fair funding in our state. I don't know if you know, but Pittsfield is actually considering closing their high school because of lack of funds. I have only ever worked in schools that are struggling with that and with their equity in education. I believe that our state has abdicated its role in funding its schools for, years, at least 20 years. There are taxes, the SWEP tax that has been misused and misappropriated. And, if the town doesn't want to keep seeing its taxes increase for the school, and I get that, we don't want that, we have to go to the state and we have to press the state to do their job. New Hampshire funds its schools at like 20%, which is the lowest of any state. We are the only state that actually underfunds its schools. When I learned that this year, it kind of blew my mind. And if our state legislators aren't willing to fight for our public education and they're gonna keep putting it on the taxpayers, that's a problem. And we're gonna see Deerfield, we're gonna see schools around us start to shut down. And we're gonna see the erosion of public education, which it should be the equalizer. I am working with or involved with some of the nonprofits in the state that are working for fair funding. I'm attending webinars. I encourage everybody to do that when they talk. There's lots of webinars out there about fair funding and things like that, but I do believe that this state needs to be doing more for us, and I will fight for that. I am fighting for it, even if I'm not elected, I'm still gonna fight for it.
Thank you. Bertie, was that question only directed to?
Yes.
Any other questions?
I don't know if anyone else does.
Apparently not.
Thank you. So, in the opening remarks, we heard a lot of language around action and getting things done. So, my question to each of you are, what are the top 3 priorities in the Deerfield School District that are currently not done, that need to be done? And what is your plan, your specific plan, to move that forward, to get it done in a 3-year or less tenure?
Thank you. Let's start at this end.
Okay, let's start.
Mr. Langlois?
So it's difficult to say what's not getting done because the biggest items that we have to address are the ones that are currently ongoing. So Deerfield has had a space needs issue in our school for as long as I've been on the board. It's a methodical approach. It's a long process and it's very methodical to add on to or expand your school. I don't want to go before the taxpayers and ask for a large sum of money and build a building and find out it's going to be empty 5 years later. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to complete that, and that work is ongoing. So the first item is we need to address our space needs issue. In doing that, the goal is to bring them on before the taxpayers if all goes well next year. The taxpayers in that case have the ability to support it or not, and then we have a decision from them. The second item is obviously the needs of our high school students and how we can work with the desires of the community, which we've heard pretty clearly for the last number of years, as well as the needs of the community that budgetarily and making sure that all of our students receive the education they deserve. So those are the 2 biggest issues that I look at. Third issue, educationally, education's constantly changing, and keeping up with the evolution of education is a continually moving target. And trying to stay on top of that and on pace with that and working with our administrators is the third item that I always want to follow and try to make sure we're on the cutting edge when we can be.
Thank you. Ms. Baker.
Thank you for the question, Kevin. I think, I think my answer is very similar to Zach's, actually. I think, we have the space needs issue, which has been going on for a long time, and I personally felt very frustrated by, as I said, I've lived here for 8 years, and for 8 years I've been hearing about space needs issues and not seeing anything happen. High school is also something I'm very passionate about. That's something that I would see as a priority. And I think that where I can give the board credit is that this year there's been so many meetings and so much momentum that I do feel like they are on track to make some good progress on these two initiatives. So where I would come in is I just want to make sure we keep that temperature up, we keep that momentum going. I think burnout is a real issue, especially with the year that we've had. So I can foresee that there might be a time when that pace starts to slow, and I think that some new blood would keep that temperature turned up and keep that pace high. The third priority I would say is probably our busing. Our busing is a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. It is, I don't want to say it's an abject failure, but it is unbelievable to me what the issues that we have had with our busing company. Once we get through, the space needs issue and the high school and those things are set, I would like to see us take a long, hard look at what, if anything, we can do about busing, whether that be, whether that be re-examining contracts, renegotiating contracts, bringing legal into it to make sure that those contracts are written to benefit, if not just us, to benefit us in a much greater way, to make it more clear as to what we are entitled to. And if that's not a real option, I would love to see us put together some kind of plan or at least examine the option of what does it take to bring busing under our realm of control. I grew up in my school where I grew up, my public school, the school owned the buses. And we had a garage on the school grounds and the buses. And I know that's a huge project, and I'm in no way saying that absolutely we should do it tomorrow. I would just like to look at the options and see what is available and what might make sense as a long-term goal to get us out of that awful conversation we have every single August about whether or not we have enough buses.
Thank you. Mrs. Wellington.
So I'm not going to add anything new. We know that we need a high school contract and there are space issues. What I can bring to the table is community organizing. When I was an educator in Pittsfield, I worked with Pittsfield Listens, which is it's now folded, but a nonprofit organizing group under the umbrella of New Hampshire Listens. That was about community organizing. I spent a year working with them after I left my classroom position. As an educator, I was able to help get our entire handbook rewritten in a year and passed by the board, and removal of the hat policy, which you wouldn't think was a big deal, but was a huge deal. And it required a lot of community engagement about why students should wear hats. So I think I'm really good at reaching out. I think I'm really good at bringing people in. I think I'm really good at creating processes that allow all voices to be heard in a safe environment that's not judgmental. And trying to get everybody on board. So that's what I would bring to the table.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd like to say that I admire the bravery of people that are willing to serve on the school board. That must be a difficult task. So I'll ask my question with my tongue in cheek.
Oh, I'm sorry. Could you introduce yourself?
Oh, it's Will Huebner, running for the MPC.
It's a different recording for the school.
Sorry, shameless plug.
I know.
So I do admire those that work so hard in the school, and I remember teachers that helped me a lot in my lifetime, so I'm very sensitive to that. However, I did hear some voicing of, I think it was Jenny that said, we're the lowest state in the union that receives federal funding from the federal government for our school system.
State funding.
State funding, right, for our local school system, okay. Yeah. So, do we want, the more somebody gives you money, the more control they have over you, is what I find. And so, are we better off receiving no state funds and simply running on our own school budget as an independent county? Yeah, I'm sure I know what your answer is going to be to that. but do we want to involve ourselves in having to comply with certain types of standards and rules that, and I'm speaking out of turn because I don't know what I'm talking about. Do we sign up for certain standards and rules as a result of taking funds from outside of our own community? Why don't we run our own funding? So is 20% bad?
So let's hear what each of you has to say to that question, Jenny.
So, so the state is giving us about 20%, right, and we're paying about 80%. But that's like very rough, generalized terms. I don't see why it has to be one or the other. I don't see why the state cannot equally fund all of the schools. And, you know, when Deerfield does a really good job of its per pupil ratio, but, you know, Freedom, so Deerfield, I think we're at 16,000 or 18,000 per student, somewhere around there, but, you know, Freedom, New Hampshire, they spend $33,000 per student. You can't tell me that the students in Freedom, New Hampshire are getting the same education as the students in Deerfield. When we're talking about like Bedford and, you know, Hooksett and versus like Pittsfield and Claremont and Berlin, like there's not equity. And so if we want a state with good citizens that can go out and like do work and do good things for our community, we have to fund our schools equally. And we have to make it up, not like force the towns to make up those gaps. And that's what's happening right now. So if we are live free or die, why does it have to be one or the other? I firmly believe that the state can give more money and provide more resources to the schools without interjecting more control. You know.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Baker.
That's a really great question. I think, you know, I tend to agree with you that when you take money from anyone or any source, you are opening yourself up to being under the control of that source. So I would hesitate to advocate for any, or to, especially to have the school board be in a position of activism amongst the state when it comes to funding. I would hesitate there. I would have to do a lot of my own research to come up with a conclusion there. I don't necessarily believe that more money equals better outcomes 100% of the time. I think it's certainly a factor, you know, and it's one that, you know, I can see, to Ms. Wellington's point, how there can be a large discrepancy there that can adversely affect outcomes, but I would probably want to look at where we are ranking comparatively to those towns and whether or not we really need to use those funds, and then ultimately, what are we going to use those funds for? If we are going to take money from a federal source, we need to be sure that we know what we're signing up for, and we need to be sure that whatever we're funding with that money is going to create a real measurable impact on student experience or education. So yeah, I would probably hesitate there, and I would need to learn a lot more about that before I was supposed to like that.
Thank you. Mr. Langlois.
So the state has an obligation to fund public education in New Hampshire. The state there's varying opinions. My opinion is they woefully underfund public education in New Hampshire. The state's funding is about $3,600 per student, and it costs $17.50 or so to educate a Deerfield student. The bigger issue we run into is not necessarily the state's funding, and the reason why everybody's taxes are so driven by schools is it's where our funding in town comes from. So in a community like Deerfield, it's a veteran community, the property taxpayers, the homeowners are bearing the burden for everything. So we talk about all these different avenues, but the biggest avenue we run into is that our revenue streams are very limited in Deerfield. We are collecting the money from the property owners. So, you know, the state's funding is woefully inadequate. Does the state drive more policy with their funding? No, the state's policies are independent of the funding, and the state's mandates are independent of the funding for the most part. But, you know, if you want to get into a deep conversation about how it impacts your taxes, that's how it impacts your taxes. Deerfield's tax base is homeowners, and our budget drives, unfortunately, your tax bill every single year. And the school's budget drives your tax bill much more than the town's budget. And so we will take every penny we can get from the state. That's what we get.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? for our candidates.
I have one more quick question. Will you pair NBC? Will you pair NBC? In business, we're results oriented. If it doesn't get the results, we do something different. In your opinion, as school board members, how would you rate our schools here in Deerfield? I know DCS has a very good reputation in the town. I think people really love it. How would you rate your job, as school board members or potential members? How are we doing? How are our test scores? How are the results? How do we measure it? Are Deerfield schools good or not so good?
Let's start with Ms. Baker.
I know, I haven't gone first yet. Are Deerfield schools good? Yes, I would say Deerfield schools are good. We have a reputation for excellence. When I speak to friends who live in other towns, and I had a boss who I spoke to once, and I said that we lived in Deerfield, and she said, "Oh, it's such a great school. They have such an excellent program for IEPs," and that made me so proud. So yes, I do think DCS is a good school. As far as where do we rank? That I don't know with specificity. I couldn't tell you where we rank on the state. I think we're probably about middle of the road. So obviously there is improvement that can be made for sure. How do we decide whether or not we as a board are being effective? Ultimately for me, it boils down to what has actually happened, what goals were set, what was actually achieved. And then personally, I think if you run into your neighbor or a taxpayer at the Deerfield Fair and they can't tell you what the school board has accomplished, that's a problem. I don't like that. I think that there is a big opportunity for better communication and more easily digestible communication so that the taxpayers of this town and the parents know what the school board has achieved every year. I think an end of year report would be a great idea, to have a nice digestible format that people can read and we can say, this is what the issues were faced, these are the goals we set, this is the progress we made, here's what we achieved, so that people can feel confident in who they elected and the impact that they're making.
Thank you. Mr. Langlois.
So is there room for improvement? Yes, there's always room for improvement. And when you look at, you can look at data sets and that shows one side of the equation. You look at the students themselves, you look at the experience they're having, you look at what we bring and we offer, we have a phenomenal school. We think outside the box in many ways. We look at new and exciting ways to educate the kids. There's a lot of factors that go specifically into test scores, so if you weigh those as the only metric that you judge a school by, you're going to miss out on so much of what any individual school has to offer. So, do we have room for improvement? Always. And if you stop looking for rooms for improvement, you become complacent, and that's where failure occurs. But does Deerfield have great schools? Yes. Deerfield has phenomenal schools. My kids would not be there if I didn't firmly believe that. My kids would be in a private school if I thought that was the case.
Thank you. Ms. Wellington.
I do believe that Deerfield has good schools, and you can hear it around town, like Ms. Baker said. I also love your idea about an end of the year board report. That's great. More communication to the community is always better. And I just really think that my role as a school board member would be to support the teachers in what they need. They're the ones that are in the classrooms. They know better than I do, and I think that a board is there to lift them up, to boost their morale, to celebrate them, and to listen to their needs, and not micromanage the situation, but to give them the support that they need.
Thank you. More questions? Okay, I guess we are done. Thank you very much, candidates. So that is the end of the list of candidates tonight.
have any other questions for them, you can speak with them individually, but with that, we are complete. Thank you very much.